Dr. Mchangizi here with your Science Moment. Today I'm going to talk about how science is not scientific. And the sense in which I mean that is, and we're going to connect this up to censorship. A lot of people's intuitions about censorship and that government, it's okay for the government to censor misinformation, is based on a misunderstanding about science, and we've been talking about this in a variety of ways. But often one intuition that people have about science is that it's incredibly careful, it's incredibly scientific, it's incredibly mathematical, and it's just A followed by B, and it's all deduction, and everything that happens is sort of a deterministic matter that once you've got government with the right scientists there, they can just decide and figure out the truth. So once you've done that, like a machine, like an AI, then you can just stop all the misinformation. You just say, look, that's done. Let's forget about that. I wanted to just point out two respects in which science is in fact one of the messiest things that occurs. Sure, there are parts of it, there are parts of science where it's fairly deterministic. Once you have a hypothesis that you're testing, there's often very well-treaded ways to see how significant, at least supported it is given the evidence or the data that you have. But there's a couple parts to science that, in fact, the reason that science works at all, which are not scientific at all in the normal everyday sense of it. So let me just go in here and show you an old, an example paper of mine that kind of would give you sort of an impression of what one imagines when one thinks of a scientific paper. So in a scientific paper, like this is an old paper of mine that's about why letters ended up to be evolving the way they did, and why there are as many letters of what complexity they are in different kinds of writing systems. And all that I really care for you to see is that just look how beautiful it is, right? It's just very elegant, it's very organized, it has nice beautiful tables, it has beautiful bar graphs and careful diagrams and lots of formulae and so forth. It certainly is the kind of thing that you imagine that science should be about. Super careful, super nerdy, super square, right? And the same thing happens in this is a sort of an academic article, same thing happens in actual publications. By the time they're done, there's a beauty and elegance to them that comes out, and it's just, everything is just where it should be, like in a couple of my books. Now, in reality, though, when we come to the ideas, after the fact, of course, we make them beautiful and we organize them into this incredibly scientific appearing structure. But historically, as a theorist, I come up with ideas, and I've got notebooks like this that go back 20 years. I've got about 50 of these sorts of notebooks. And all that I want you to see in these notebooks is the degree to which, these are actually much neater than your average person's. I tend to write in very small type and try to keep it organized. But these are where the ideas come from most scientists. They're these messy, and everybody has their own system. They have incredibly messy ways of coming to the ideas and working through the ideas. These are not by any means scientific in the sense that there's no rules, there's no scientific rules for how you're supposed to do this. This is just something that has to come inspired, like artists become inspired, and that just ideas pop into their brains. There is no science to coming up with great ideas. It has to happen in just millions of heads out there, and you yourself have to act like a million heads working towards hoping that something will spring up in you. So there's nothing scientific about coming up with these sorts of ideas, and that hopefully is one step to help you realize that science is in fact not scientific. It's like an art. Now, the second sense in which science is not scientific that I wanted to point out to you today is that the actual process of science, let me bring myself back into here, the actual process of science itself is another way that most people don't appreciate, is incredibly messy. The actual process of science, sure, in that individual paper, I might make it look very pretty by the end of it, but the actual reason that science works is the same reason that evolution works, is the same reason that free markets work. They work because of an immense network of competing folks in a massive network that through selection processes. And what one means by selection processes, it means that over time, certain ideas get selected for. And those ones, those reputations of those scientists who discovered those things get higher, but they get selected for. Those ideas start to spread across the network, and those inform other ideas, which lead to variants on those ideas, which then improve it, and so forth. This is a kind of natural selection process. These are the processes of evolution, which are the messiest things that exist. As we've talked about before, the reason that we end up with these beautiful designed bodies and brains of plants and animals out there, which are really nerdy and scientific and like the journal articles in these books, the reason you get these gorgeously designed things is through the messiest, most disgusting process that exists in the universe, which is natural selection, which is animals differentially eating one another and ending their lives short before they've had kids and so forth. It's those messy processes. It's the messy creative processes of coming up with those ideas. It's the messy network selection processes that lead to some ideas growing over time, and that's how we come to have the knowledge that we have. None of that is scientific in the everyday sense, where by scientific I mean in these nerdy, very careful ways. Centralized government, fact checkers at Twitter or Facebook can't do that alone. The only way that society and science together can come towards the truth is by having all of the individuals and all of the networks doing these ugly creative processes, messy, dirty processes in each and every individual's head, and having the networks in their ugly fashions selecting out the best ideas over time. And that was your science moment.